They tell you pleasure is the reward, that after effort comes indulgence, after pain comes sweetness, after pressure comes relief. But what if that belief is the greatest misunderstanding of modern life? What if pleasure is not the reward at all, but the disguise? What if the sugar, the scrolling, the lust, the jokes, the endless entertainment are not signs of a fulfilled existence, but carefully designed masks hiding something far older and far more uncomfortable? Ask yourself this without rushing to answer. When was the last time you felt complete without needing to add something on top? Not entertained, not distracted, not temporarily soothed, but genuinely settled inside yourself. Because this is the contradiction of our age. Never before has pleasure been so accessible, and never before have so many people felt so internally empty. Carl Jung warned that what we chase for comfort often becomes the very barrier to healing. We live in a culture that treats discomfort as a malfunction instead of a message. The moment unease appears, we reach outward. You wake up and instinctively grab your phone, not because something meaningful awaits you, but because silence arrives first, and silence feels dangerous. You scroll without intention. A clip makes you smile for seconds. Another replaces it. Another follows. Time evaporates, but the inner pressure remains untouched. You eat something, not because your body asked, but because your mind wanted interruption. And when it's over, guilt creeps in quietly. Not moral guilt, existential guilt. A subtle recognition that something essential was bypassed again. What you were reaching for was never dopamine or pleasure. It was escape. It was distance from an unnamed tension you've carried for years. Jung described the shadow as the parts of us we bury beneath distraction and performance. And pleasure, when used unconsciously, becomes the shovel. When you eat without hunger, desire without intimacy, scroll without curiosity, you are not choosing joy. You are choosing anesthesia. Most pleasure today is not joy at all. It is relief from self-awareness. And relief always demands payment. Each artificial comfort deepens the hunger for something real, while convincing you that the hunger itself is the problem. We are not broken. We are conditioned to confuse noise with nourishment, stimulation with meaning, escape with happiness. This conditioning begins early. A child cries and no one responds. The lesson forms silently. Pain brings nothing. But when the child smiles, behaves, distracts themselves, approval arrives. That reward imprints itself on the nervous system. Pain becomes something to hide. Performance becomes survival. Years later, pain is wordless, but pleasure becomes loud. Louder than loneliness, louder than fear, louder than the part of you that still wants to be seen without performing. Pleasure has memory. Each time it silences discomfort, the body learns to fear stillness. Silence becomes unbearable. That's why so many people cannot sit alone without reaching for something. Music fills showers. Noise fills rooms. Screens fill nights. Jung understood this deeply. Pleasure itself is not the enemy. Avoidance is. When pleasure replaces presence, it becomes poison. When it replaces truth, it becomes dependency. Real pleasure is subtle. It does not demand your attention. It does not numb your edges. It expands you quietly. It lives in honest conversation, in meaningful effort, in completing something you once avoided, in waking up and realizing you are no longer controlled by the thing that once owned you. But this kind of pleasure is slow. It requires effort, patience, and vulnerability. And because it cannot be consumed instantly, most people never develop the taste for it. Jung once wrote that people will do almost anything, no matter how irrational, to avoid facing their own soul. Pleasure may be the most sophisticated avoidance mechanism ever created. As children, pleasure becomes our translator. Don't cry, have this. Stop feeling, look here. Neurologically, the brain learns that emotion equals danger and stimulation equals safety. Over time, you become fluent in distraction. Pleasure speaks when you are afraid to say, "I'm not okay." It dances when you are too exhausted to admit, "I feel empty." It smiles when all you want to do is scream. But every time emotion is replaced with stimulation, intimacy with the self erodes. When the inner world is ignored, the outer world grows louder. The buzz, the ping, the binge, all shouting so you don't have to hear what's underneath. And what's underneath is not boredom. It's grief. It's longing. It's the wound of being unseen. Pleasure is not bad. It becomes destructive only when it replaces presence. The guilt that follows indulgence is not punishment. It is awareness, knocking quietly. A part of you knows you were not fed, only delayed. Shadow work is not about becoming darker or more extreme. It is about noticing where you abandon yourself for relief and choosing truth instead. Many people chase relationships, intensity, stimulation, and chaos, not because they love them, but because silence feels threatening. Obsession, crash, repeat. Pleasure becomes a temporary bandage until it fails. Here is the illusion that must be shattered. Pleasure is not healing. Pleasure is not peace. Pleasure is not power. Pleasure is a tool, and when tools are misused, they damage the very thing they were meant to support. Contrast this with delayed gratification. Think of a moment when you resisted an urge and later felt calm, grounded, and proud. That wasn't deprivation, it was self-trust, and self-trust is the real high. When you trust yourself, pleasure loses its grip. You stop consuming it unconsciously. You choose it deliberately. And when chosen deliberately, pleasure becomes celebration instead of sedation. Imagine being alone in silence without panic, not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer running from yourself. That is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming whole through integration, not denial, the ability to experience pleasure without using it as anesthesia, and to experience silence without fear. You don't reach this state by chasing highs. You reach it by lowering the volume of distraction and listening to what it was covering up. To reclaim your life, you must admit something uncomfortable. You have betrayed yourself gradually, repeatedly, quietly. Every quick fix, every avoided still moment, every time you said, "This makes me feel good," when it really just helped you forget. This is not shame. This is awakening. You are surviving. Now you are ready to live. Once you see the pattern, old pleasures lose their power. The party feels hollow. The scroll feels empty. The sugar no longer soothes. Because the real pain was never boredom. It was the absence of self. Healing is not loud. It is walking into the house you've avoided, sitting with the silence and listening. Silence is not emptiness. It is presence. The presence of everything you postponed. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is not needing to. True pleasure is the moment you realize you no longer have to escape yourself. You can sit still and feel full, not because life is overflowing, but because you are present within it. You will still enjoy life. You will laugh, desire, taste sweetness, and feel joy. But you will do it with awareness, and awareness protects your peace. Because the only pleasure worth having is the one you don't have to chase.